to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending September 10th. We've got a big show tonight. Bryan Young from uwager.eu is going to join us. He's going to stop by and tell us where the money's coming in this weekend in college and pro football. We're also going to have Joe Fortenbaugh join us. He's going to join us in segment 2, Handicapper's Corner. He's going to talk about the 3 big games from the Bay Area this week, college and pro. And, of course, we're going to break down all of the big games, college and pro. Bryan Leonard, Ralph Michaels, and myself are in studio. Mark Seidel is behind the controls, making sure we sound good. I'm Marco D'Angelo. Let's get the party started and welcome in our first guest tonight. As we're going to be doing all season long, we're going to be talking to sportsbook operators. Usually we're talking to guys right here in Vegas, but we also want to give you guys a look behind the counter at some offshore places. And our favorite place is uwager.eu. And we're going to welcome in Bryan Young. Bryan, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Hey, guys, what's going on? Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How about you guys? Thanks for having me.
No problem, Bryan. You know, it's first week of the NFL. I know we had some betting last week for sure, the opening week of college football. How did the house make out last week with that first week of college action?
We actually did really, really well. The best, from what I'm hearing, the biggest games we won on were that Notre Dame-Michigan game and that LSU game against Miami. So we did really well on those 2 games specifically. I don't think anyone really anticipated Michigan going into Notre Dame and really taking that loss like they did.
Yeah, it seems like it was the same way offshore as it was here in Vegas. We talked to several bookmakers, and the Michigan game was the big swing game for them on the weekend, being the night game. And anytime you've got, the 2 powerhouses like that, both teams have big followings, and everybody was on the Michigan side, and that definitely helped the books. But, one thing, Bryan, during the season, our listeners hate to hear, when the books make the money. They want to hear when they make the money. And, we'll be asking you, too, throughout the season, who that game or games weren't so good for the house. So we'll be looking forward to hearing some of that down the road in the whenever you stop by to talk with us. Jumping ahead to this week, Bryan, we've got college action on Saturday. We're taping on Thursday, so we won't talk about the NFL game Thursday night or the Friday game. But let's talk about Saturday action, college football. Where's the money coming in? Where's your biggest liability so far on the weekend card?
Well, from what I'm seeing, a lot of people haven't really put in their bets. I think they're all our sharp players are waiting for either line movements or these games coming up. What I am seeing, though, is that for tomorrow's game, that TCU game, a lot of people are getting in on that. They really like that spread at minus 23 for TCU at UWager right now. That's where we're seeing the most money come in right at the moment, to be honest with you guys.
Okay, when you talk about, the sharp action and square action, we always ask the books here, Joes versus pros. How about NFL? We know the NFL is the most popular and is going to have more of the recreational player, so to speak, jump in on the NFL, obviously. And they can move a line as fast as the sharps come in, because you can get one sharp guy come in, drop $5,000 on a side, and you can get $100 players, equal that out in a hurry. What are you seeing in the NFL action on Sunday and Monday?
What we're seeing really is a lot of people are really favoring that Brown side. I don't know if it's Hard Knocks that's really giving them the favor. People seem to always be impressed with the Browns after their preseason. Last year they went 4-0 and ended up 0-16 in the regular season. So, but that's what we're seeing right now, is that a lot of our players are really liking that Brown side. With Baker Mayfield maybe coming into that starting position under Tyrod Taylor. We'll see what they do, though. I'm really optimistic about this Browns team this year, but it seems to be the way with everyone. That seems to be the trend again this year.
Yeah, last year the Browns, it seemed like week after week, come Sunday morning, you saw that late money pour in on the Browns, and unfortunately for the sharp better, and that wasn't public money, that was sharp money coming in on the Browns. And every week they seem to disappoint. In studio with me is Bryan Leonard. He is a longtime Cleveland Browns sufferer. He lives here in Vegas right now, but he spent a good portion of his life there in Cleveland. Bryan, got anything you want to add on the Browns?
Well, I've had this discussion with a few people. I think they're an 8-win team with the players they have. I think they're a 2-win team with the coaches they have. So they're going to end up somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. Don't go too far out on the limb there, Bryan. Bryan, we got two Bryans in here. At least you guys spell your names different. The Bryan here spells it weird. Bryan, you spell it the right way. I'm talking
with
to
the I.
Yeah,
well, I was too young to make the suggestion, okay?
Okay, no problem.
Well, I got to say, I'm kind of in the suffering group with you. I'm a Lions fan by nature, so we're kind of on the same page with that one. We're both suffering.
Well, I know you've talked to our boy Johnny Detroit. He is a longtime Lions sufferer. You two, I'm sorry, I have to mention it now. I mean, we got a Cleveland Browns sufferer, a Detroit Lions. I almost feel, ashamed to say, 6 Super Bowl titles where I come from, Pittsburgh. So sorry, guys, but I always tell my buddy Bryan here in the studio. The good thing about Cleveland is it's only a 2.5-hour drive that they can look at 6 Super Bowl trophies if they really want to see one.
Right.
Bryan, tell our listeners about uwager.eu and how they can become a member and some specials you guys got running right now.
We actually got some really good specials running for these customers going on. We've been in business for 20 years. We're best known in the industry for our same-day payouts. What we got going on, especially with WagerTalk, is we got a 70% bonus happening for you guys. So call in, make a $100 deposit. We're going to give you $70 on top of it to play around with. You can call us at 1-888-281-3641, or simply just go to uwager.eu, sign up for your account, and use promo code WT70. Once you do that, you're good to go. You can make any top plays that you want. We also have a Monday and Thursday night football competition. If you're active in the last 7 days of those games, if you can correctly guess the exact score of the games, we'll either give you $5,000 on Mondays or $2,500 on Thursdays. So we got some really good promotions, and we got player props and build your own props. So we got a lot going on over here, a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't know about.
Bryan, I'm a longtime user of uwager.eu, and I've been very impressed by your service. You did mention the 70% bonus. Is there a limit to that?
It's up to $1,000. So, even if you make a $1,000 deposit, we'll give you $700 right on top of it. So it's actually a really, really good deal, and that's exclusive for WagerTalk. So, we'll get you guys going. We're happy to have you.
All right, good stuff. Bryan, we're going to have you on down the road again here on the podcast. We want to get a little bit of the information on what's happening offshore as well as here in Vegas. Our listeners, as I said, they love to take that look behind the counter and see where the action's at and understand the difference between the sharp action and the public action, and we'll go from there. But good having you on. We'll have you on again, and appreciate you stopping by. And I got to tell our listeners, if you want an offshore account, 70% sign-up bonus up to $1,000. That's really. A lot of guys will give that bonus, but it's on a small total. You get a $700 bonus if you deposit $1,000. That is a good deal. So check that out at uwager.eu. Don't forget to use that promo code WT70 to get that sign-up bonus. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to head out to the Bay Area and talk to our guy in the Bay Area, none other than Joe Fortenbaugh in Handicapper's Corner. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
All right, welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. This is segment number 2, and I was looking forward to this one. We've got Joe Fortenbaugh, You can follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Fortenbaugh. You can hear Joe weekday mornings in the Bay Area from 6 to 10 a.m. Wow, you get up early, buddy. On 95.7 The Game, and he's also the host of the very popular podcast, The Sharp 600. You can find that at covers.com. Follow him on Twitter. He tweets it out. The links as soon as it goes. Very popular podcast, and he has some very good guests on there. Just a little shameless plug there. Joe, welcome to the show.
Marco, Brian, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to talking some football with you guys.
Yeah, there's actually three nice games coming out of the Bay Area this week. One college, two pro. We'll save the pro for a moment here. We're going to talk about the college game. Big one in the Pac-12 already. You got USC coming to Stanford, and I understand you're going to that game on Saturday.
I will be. This is one of those rare moments where it seems like everyone between the two radio stations, while rivals, everyone you talk to is going to be heading to this game. And I'm trying to figure out why, because it's shocking up here that college football is almost a non-starter when it comes to the radio. If you want to lose your ratings, the first thing you should start talking about is college football, which kills me, and I know it would kill you guys, because it's something we watch and we study passionately on a weekly basis. So for some reason, I think part of it's because USC's in town. I think the other part is because Stanford's campus is a beautiful place to go see a game. So I will have the opportunity to indulge in some Chardonnay and some fine brie cheese as I get ready to talk about my favorite stock picks heading into Stanford Stadium.
Yeah, Joe, boy, times have changed. When you were back here, you and Mark were cheap beers and burritos. Now you're Chardonnay and brie cheese. My God.
In Vegas, it was like $9 could get me the world when it came to what I wanted to eat and what I wanted to drink. $9 here won't even get me in the door to a Whole Foods, so I have the privilege of shopping for their fine groceries.
All right. USC, they come to town. Freshman quarterback JT Daniels. He played our UNLV Running Rebels last week. They got off to a slow start. We expected that. A lot of guys here on the show that we do, Ralph Michaels, Dave Cokin, they said take UNLV for the first half, and that was an easy winner. They got it rolling in the second half, and USC finally just, wore down UNLV. How do you see them matching up against this Stanford team? And, Joe, in past years, Stanford, the one thing you could stamp their identity with was a hard-nosed defense. Last year, they got run on, and they got run on hard. Have they fixed that defense?
This is going to be a very interesting game for a number of reasons. Let's start with the fact that JT Daniels, the freshman quarterback for USC, this is going to be his first road start. And I'm not sure how excited I would be to have a true freshman quarterback making his first road start at Stanford against a physical, aggressive defense with a very smart head coach who has known all too well that this game was going to come in the second week of the season. This is going to be a very, very tough spot for JT Daniels. 22 of 35 last week against UNLV for 282 yards. The yards per attempt, I'd like to see that a little bit higher. I'm trying to figure out what I make of USC as a whole. I know there's talent all over the field, but last week against Nevada Vegas anyway, they win by 22, but they only outgained the Rebels by 96 total yards, winning the turnover battle +1. Something about that just doesn't feel as dominant as the final score may look to a few people. Meanwhile, Stanford, similar situation, had a hell of a time trying to get past San Diego State early before they kicked the afterburners in the gear in the second half, outgaining the Aztecs by 119 total yards. Again, a bit of a disappointment considering there was some revenge to be had in that game based on what we saw last year for the Cardinal. USC a bit troubling, 3-12-1 against the number over their last 16 games overall, 1-4 against the number over their last 5 against the Cardinal. Now, we've seen the line move in this game all the way up to Stanford -6. The one thing I'm looking at right now is an under on 56.5. I think you're going to get some good defensive football from Stanford against a freshman quarterback. And conversely, Bryce Love, the Heisman favorite heading into last weekend, he had a very difficult time trying to get anything going last week against San Diego State. Only 18 carries for 29 yards. He didn't even average 2 yards per carry. I have a feeling Shaw is going to find a way to get him more success against the Trojans. But if San Diego State was that stout against the run, USC's got the talent to do the same thing.
The flip side to that is, Joe, UNLV, though, ran for over 300 yards last week on this USC defense. There was only one team the entire season last year that topped 300 yards against this USC defense on the ground, and that was Notre Dame, and that was later in the season when USC was banged up, injuries on both sides of the ball. Bryce Love, if he doesn't get it going this week against that front line of USC, there's going to be some definite concerns for Stanford moving forward because they need him to move the football. That opens everything else up on this offense, in my opinion.
And that's, again, why I'm looking to the under, because if you are able to get the run going in this game, that should hopefully get the clock moving a little bit more frequently than we would like if we were betting an over, and it might give us some more opportunity. Now, granted, the clock's going to stop on every first down in college football, but this is a scenario where I see this being a little bit sluggish early, especially from the offensive side of the ball with USC. And Stanford, in my opinion, they've never been the type of team that just comes right out of the gate and blows anyone's doors off. They kind of like to play chess. They establish themselves early. They try to use the first 2 or 3 rounds like it's a title fight. Feel out the opposition, see where the weak spots are, find some vulnerabilities. I don't know if I'll ever get that word right, and then try to exploit them later in the game. So I think you might get a slow start, looking to the under in the first half, looking to the under for the game overall.
Yeah, that's what I was going to jump in as you were talking there, saying that I think I would split my bet and take that under in the first half, and I might actually put a little more on the under first half than the full game, and in case they get things going later in the game, and if one team falls behind and has to start throwing. As we move to the NFL, we'll go to the Sunday game because when we get to the Monday night game, I've got some questions for you with the Raiders, and we could probably make an entire podcast just on the Raiders right now. But we've got San Francisco and Minnesota. These are two of the teams that in the offseason got all of the hype. San Francisco got the hype, obviously, because of the 5-0 finish last year. Jimmy G taking over the reins and, running the table. Then you've got Minnesota, who should, they had that horrible game to lose to Philadelphia, but, again, they were lucky to get past New Orleans with the miracle play in the playoffs. But this is a team that was one of the best teams in the NFL last year. They said goodbye to Case Keenum. They signed the big free agent, Kirk Cousins. Is this Minnesota team for real? And what have you seen out of Jimmy G in the preseason that makes you confident or not confident moving forward? Because I've got a lot of question marks. That 5-0 run last year, Joe, they played teams that were out of it or did not need the win, and they took advantage of it, and now they got film on Jimmy G, and it's the beginning of the season. Every game matters. I want to see him do it now when it counts for real.
Couple concerns for Minnesota, not big ones, but without Pat Shurmur as the offensive coordinator, we saw what he got out of Case Keenum last year. So I'm a little bit worried as to how the offense might respond early in the season. I do think Kirk Cousins is a big upgrade at quarterback over Case Keenum, so that should keep things moving at a relatively solid pace. Dalvin Cook, who had that season-ending injury early last year, is back at running back, so there's a little bit more explosion in the backfield as well. I would look to the Minnesota offensive line, some issues with some injuries up front, but all in all, this is one of the most stout defenses in the game, if not the deepest. And playing at home with that crowd noise is going to be very difficult for San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo, as I've been saying for the last couple weeks, is the great deodorant. And people are wondering what that means. Well, the 5-game winning streak at the end of last season, coupled with the contract and all the hype during our offseason, up here in the Bay Area, it's Jimmy G fever. The women love him. The men want to be him. It's basically the James Bond situation here. But once we got into camp and we really started breaking this team down for a month in August, we started to realize a few things. Number one, there are some issues on the right side of the offensive line. The right guard position is a major concern. Mike Person ended up winning the job when people thought he wasn't even going to be on the roster. Jonathan Cooper got cut. Former first-round pick under Trent Baalke, Joshua Garnett didn't win the job, so right guard's up in the air, and right tackle's Mike McGlinchey. Now, McGlinchey was a top 10 draft pick out of Notre Dame, but a rookie from Notre Dame making his first career start against the Minnesota pass rush on the road, that's alarming. Now let's move to the backfield. You spent $30 million in the offseason on Jerick McKinnon, the tailback formerly of the Vikings. He suffers a torn ACL on the last play of practice last Saturday. He's out for the year. So it's Alfred Morris and Matt Breida, a big downgrade at the position. Then when you move to the defensive side of the ball, the pass rush is a major concern. Solomon Thomas and Eric Armstead have been underwhelming at best. DeForest Buckner can play, but is he going to be able to make enough plays to counteract the other problems? Reuben Foster at linebacker suspended for the first 2 games, so your Mike linebacker is going to be Fred Warner, a rookie third-round pick out of BYU. Now, Warner can fly around the field. This kid can play. He's got a lot of speed, and he fits the mold of that new-age linebacker, but the problem is he's never played an NFL game before, and he's starting at Mike against Minnesota on the road. Then you've got problems in the secondary. Richard Sherman, between his age and coming off the Achilles, if I'm Kirk Cousins, I'm going at him early. And when I'm not going at him, I'm going at Akello Witherspoon, who, while he's got a high ceiling, has been very inconsistent in training camp. So I think we all know what's going to happen here. The books are going to be facing a world of 6-point teaser plays on Minnesota. I think that's the first place you start. Shanahan and Garoppolo, there's a lot they can do, and there's a lot to get excited about, but I don't find this game to be very favorable for the Niners one way or another. I think they're in for a lot of trouble against the Vikings on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I like the Vikings. I'd like them at a better number than what they have now. I think Minnesota's got the best team in the NFL, but I do have one real serious question to ask you. How can you talk that long without breathing?
I guess that's why they hired me to do a 4-hour morning sports talk show up here. That's the one thing everyone keeps telling me. You got to slow down. You got to worry about your pace. I'm like, you people don't understand. I have so many important things to say. I have to get them all out.
You know, it's pretty amazing because we had the Tuesday meeting out here in Vegas, and we've had you there over the years to talk about some West Coast football, and John Netto would do the same thing. And the guys that are just brilliant seem to talk faster. Either that or I just can't keep up. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. Brilliant, I think, might be a slight overstatement. I think we're just big mouths who find our opinions to be so important, at least to us.
Well, I'm a legend in my own mind. I know that. Joe, I agree 100% with you on the teaser end on Minnesota. My other end of the teaser on that one, so since we're talking teasers, we'll close it out for our listeners, is Baltimore against Buffalo. That's the other end of my teaser. I know there's a lot of popular teaser combos this week, but mine is Minnesota and Baltimore, and that's my big teaser bet.
Actually, you're better off until the game goes above 7. You're probably better off on the money line playing Minnesota over the teaser bet. But I agree. I like the sides on the teasers. I think those are winning bets.
How do you feel about the Baltimore real quick, Joe? With Nathan Peterman as the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, that situation, I'm making more of a bet against the Bills than I am on the Ravens. I'm still trying to figure out what I think of the Ravens because I think Harbaugh's on the hot seat and I think Joe Flacco's on the hot seat. And there's one of two ways that can go. Either you respond well under pressure and you step up and you play big, like we saw from Eli Manning and Tom Coughlin years ago when they found themselves on the hot seat, or you continue to perform at the level in which you've been performing, and you get run out of town. Harbaugh's a tremendous coach, but ever since Flacco got that deal, it has crippled this franchise in terms of what they were able to do from a salary cap perspective. And since that Super Bowl win, I think the Ravens are 41-41. But again, Buffalo, I mean, damn, what can you get excited about there? Peterman is going to be a mess. That's probably one of those games where really early, as you're getting settled in to everything that's taking place, that's going to be the first game where the board lights up with points, and then it's going to keep happening, and then you're just not going to have to pay attention to it. I mean, I don't want to make it sound so brazen, but we saw a little bit of Peterman last year. It was a mess, and I don't see any reason to get too excited about the Bills this season. It was a nice year last year, but they're operating against a lot of elements some other teams aren't. It's tough to recruit big-time talent to Buffalo.
For sure. Well, we saved the best for last, and that is the Rams at Oakland on Monday Night Football. Joe, I got to ask you, What the hell is John Gruden doing? Does he actually have a plan, or is this just all helter-skelter? I mean, I know you got 2 number 1 draft picks in this deal, but the whole idea of getting a number 1 draft pick is to hit that lottery pick, that game-changing player that doesn't come along. How many number 1 picks just end up being bust or average players? You got Khalil Mack. You know, I always say a bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush, in my opinion, and they let it go. Is this strictly the Raiders just don't have any money for Mack?
There's a few things at play here. The one rumor is that, and a lot of people never really understood this until they started hearing about it the last few weeks, when these guys sign these monster deals, that signing bonus money, that's got to go into escrow with the league office. Like, you have to have that cash on hand, and the rumor is that Mark Davis doesn't. I don't find that to be true for a few reasons. Number one, the city of Las Vegas just handed him $750 million. Number two, he just gave $100 million to John Gruden. And number three, according to Gruden, they made an offer to Mack, but it just wasn't high enough. Now, I know what that is. They lowballed him, knowing he would say no, so that they could come back later and tell everyone they tried. Well, even if they came out low, let's be honest, they probably had to offer what Von Miller got a couple years ago, and that's $17 million a year. So if you're telling me you've got $17 million a year, you don't have $22 million a year, something smells with that. I think that's kind of the Raiders' way of borrowing from the A's, trying to convince the world they just don't have the money to get it done, when the reality is they have plenty. That's what the A's tell everyone every year. Well, we just don't have any money. Yes, you do. You have plenty of it. You've been hoarding it for years. You just don't want to spend it. It doesn't mean you don't have it. It means you don't want to spend it. So I don't think that's the problem. I think Gruden's got a philosophy, and Gruden's philosophy is that he is not going to spend more than $20 million a year at a non-quarterback position. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But you cannot structure your organization the way the Raiders structured it. You hire the GM, then you hire the coach, then the two go out together and they find the quarterback. Now, if you want to go out and hire the coach first, fine. But he's got to be on the same page as the GM. How dysfunctional do you have to be to have a GM and a coach who have nothing in common, who don't want to work together? Because clearly these two don't want to work together. Gruden's been blowing out all of Reggie's guys, and the only ones of Reggie's guys that have played well, he just traded away in Khalil Mack. So the whole thing reeks of Gruden just trying to establish dominance over the organization and run Reggie out of town. That's first and foremost. So I get that he's got the philosophy, but again, what's the point of hitting on a draft pick if you can't keep him in the fold? You just mentioned that, and I thought Peter King a couple weeks ago said this perfectly. If you can draft a guy like Khalil Mack, who has not missed a game, who is a great locker room leader, who's loved by his teammates, who's won Defensive Player of the Year, who's in his prime, if all those boxes are checked and you can't find a way to pay him, you are admitting you cannot do business in the modern NFL. That's what that is. That's a big white flag saying we don't know how to make this work. Aaron Donald is under contract with the Rams. His cap number, after getting $22 million a year, went from $6.5 million this season to $8.5 million this season. It's just a $2 million increase. There are ways to make these things work, but the Raiders couldn't do it. Fine, they get their draft picks back, whatever. Do you trust Gruden to make this thing work? I went through every one of his Tampa Bay draft picks. He made 61 of them in 7 years. 3 of them went to the Pro Bowl. One of them was Aqib Talib, who didn't go to the Pro Bowl for like 7 years into his career when he is long gone from Tampa Bay. One of them was Jeremy Zutah, who ended up in Baltimore and in the 9th year of his career went to a Pro Bowl. And the other was Davin Joseph, who went to 1 Pro Bowl under Gruden and then 1 3 years after Gruden was fired. The guy doesn't draft well, and he's not an offensive mind like everyone makes him out to be. Go back and look at his offenses in scoring. All 7 years he was in Tampa, they ranked 18th or worse in scoring every single year. So he's not a great coach, and he's not a great drafter. So I don't know if I trust him to make any of these decisions, because let's be honest, every year Tampa got away from Tony Dungy, they got worse. They have not won a playoff game since Gruden won that Super Bowl with Dungy's guys. And everything after that year, they've gotten worse. Most of us are always told, leave the situation better than you found it, right? Except for when we're all at the buffet together. That's always left way worse than when we originally found it. But that's the issue. Gruden didn't leave that situation better. He made it worse, and then he got fired. So that's a long rant. I apologize for doing so much on it, but to get that all off the chest, I do think he has a plan. I don't buy into it. I don't think it's going to work.
All right, Monday night we've got the Rams. This is a team that was good last year. They went out and spent more money, made themselves better, and then they played the entire preseason. They didn't give a shit about the preseason. I have never seen an NFL team with their starters play the fewest number of plays that they played this year in the preseason. Now, obviously, if this works out, everybody's going to, buy into it and do it. But what do you think of the Rams matching up in this Monday night game? And if you got to talk about for John Gruden to make his return back to the coaching ranks, to do it on Monday Night Football, where he has spent the last decade, on Monday Night Football, and to have it at home, at Oakland, on the second game, I can only imagine how that black hole is going to be on a Monday night when they've had all day to be drinking. I know I wouldn't want to be sitting out there. Tell me how this game breaks down, and tell me if John Gruden can coach in today's era, or are we going to see, football from the early 2000s?
All right, so you hit the nail on the head with the only concern I have regarding the Rams. They haven't played any high reps or high-velocity reps, in my opinion. I keep hearing about these inter-squad scrimmages they have. That's not a substitute. They have no game reps whatsoever. So I wouldn't be surprised if they came out sluggish. However, they have the equalizer to something like that, and it's Todd Gurley. Just run the ball. That's all you got to do, run the ball. Now, Oakland's front four is going to be relatively untested, very young. Maurice Hurst, the first-round prospect who fell to the fifth because of the heart condition out of Michigan, he had a great preseason. So did P.J. Hall, another rookie. And Arden Key, the pass rusher out of LSU, is getting people excited. But again, those three have a combined 0 starts in the National Football League. So good luck against the Rams and Todd Gurley. I think that if you're going to bet this game, the play I've liked the most for a while is under 49.5. I think on the Rams side, because they haven't played it all in the preseason, there's going to be a little bit of rust. They're going to be on the road. There's going to be a lot of crowd noise. Again, the best equalizer for crowd noise is a strong running game. Feed Todd Gurley, take the crowd out of it, run the clock down, control the possession. So that's what I think the Rams are going to do. On the flip side, I think Derek Carr and the offense are probably going to struggle a little bit trying to pick up John Gruden's new system. It's going to take some time. And again, even if they're sharp, they're going against Wade Phillips and arguably one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the game. Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters are manning the corner positions. You got Ndamukong Kung Su and Aaron Donald on the inside. Good luck, Marshawn Lynch, running on that. So I'm leaning to the under overall for the game. I really like that play. But as for Gruden, there are actually two nuggets I think everyone needs to be well aware of. One, the Mac trade. Everyone knows about that. But why do you make that trade? That leads into nugget number 2. The rumor is that Gruden was saying for months before he even took this job that when he was considering it, he thought this team was really low on talent. That he looked at the roster, and if you go back through the last 3 drafts, not counting this last draft, they didn't hit on many picks. They cut a lot of those guys. They got the oldest roster in the league by a mile. And I mean, oldest roster to start the season since at least 2012, according to a research report that came out of Philadelphia. So this is an old roster with a lot of holes in it, a lot of unproven spots, and a head coach who doesn't have a lot of faith. And if he had faith, he's not trading away his best defensive player in Khalil Mack. Believe you me. If he thinks this is a Super Bowl team, you're keeping that guy. So I think Gruden realizes this is going to be a struggle and that he's in charge of a rebuild, and his main goal is to get this roster in shape for when they come down to see you guys in Vegas in a couple years. So I don't have a whole lot of faith in the Raiders overall. So again, possible teaser play with the Rams based on where this number's going, but I like the Rams to win the game, and I like them to win it under the total of 49.5.
All right, Joe. As always, great information from you. Thanks for coming on. We'll hit you up again when we've got some big games coming out of the Bay Area. And I know NFL, you could hit any team. I could throw all 32 teams at you, and you'd nail each and every one of them. I appreciate you being on, and we're going to step out, take a quick break, and when we come back, guys, Bryan Leonard and Ralph Michaels, we're going to jump in and break down the college football card for Saturday. We'll be right back.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. This is college football preview section. We're going to talk, first off, we're going to go to, looks like a throwback game. Did they turn the clocks back to 2010? Colorado, Nebraska? Are we back to the Big 12 glory days? I'll start with you, Brian, on this one. Last week, Nebraska got their game canceled against Akron. I know you're a big follower of Akron, being a alumni from Akron. I think there's no team in college football that there was 4 teams affected by weather last week. Nebraska got hurt the worst, in my opinion, because you got a new coach, new quarterback. They needed to get that game under their belt, and they're going to be facing a Colorado team that already got a game under their belt, and they manhandled a Colorado State team that we confirmed after the first week. We thought, second week we confirmed this Colorado State team is bad. What do you make of this one going in?
Yeah, you're right that Nebraska really needed to get that game in, and they were playing Akron, so it was basically a walkthrough for them. The Zips aren't going to be very good this year. But really, what do we learn out of Colorado? Because they played Colorado State, and you just take a look at what Colorado State has done. That defense has been horrendous. So Colorado looked pretty good in that game, and it's not often you win a game by 32 points and you lose a turnover battle. That tells you how bad Colorado State was. So I'm not sure what we saw out of Colorado, what we could play forward. So this is a game, at least for myself, it's going to be a wait-and-see game and see what happens. The public is all over the dog here, actually, but a lot of people are interested in playing Nebraska because of the coach and his past history. This will be a game that I'll be sitting out.
Ralph, you look at this one, and, Nebraska, as we said, didn't get to play last week. How do you see them moving in with they're breaking in a new quarterback and breaking in Scott Frost's system against this Colorado team? What did you get from watching Colorado last week dismantle Colorado State?
Well, like Brian said, we learned Colorado State is just not a very good team this year. They only had 9 starters back. They were run out through the ground, both Hawaii and Colorado. But, Scott Frost said this Monday was the best day of practice he's ever had as a coach. That's as an assistant coach, as a head coach. He said the kids have completely rebounded. He said Tuesday was almost as good as a day of practice. He doesn't think they missed one beat not playing that game. He thinks they're ready. He thinks they're going to be able to show things that Colorado couldn't watch on film. He thinks that actually gives them an advantage over Colorado. Colorado now is prepping for a team they don't know what to expect with the freshman quarterback and the new head coach, with what Frost brings to Nebraska. So, in this one, I think that people are overrating Colorado, and the line is where it is because, of a 32-point win. I'm actually buying into some of the Scott Frost hype. I'm not buying in it enough to back Nebraska this week, but I'm buying enough into it to stay off the game.
Well, I don't like that the line's dropping. I lean to Colorado like a lot of people do. I'm a situational handicapper, and I just think it's a huge edge for them having that game under their belt and, going to play Nebraska. I think it's a game that's going to go down to the wire. I will take the points in it, but with it dropping, if it goes any lower, I'm not going to get involved with it, but I do have a lean to Colorado.
Marco, one more, your point for Colorado backers. Colorado has 2 big things going for them. The Colorado State game was on Friday, so they have the extra day. It's not like they have to travel and they lose a day, and they have New Hampshire on deck, so they're not having to prep for a team 2 weeks in advance.
All right, talking about a team that played like they had a bye week last week, Arizona at Euston. Guys, you look at this Arizona team and coming in, a lot of hype surrounding them. You got Sumlin moving in from Texas A&M. The game plan he ran last week against BYU, he did not utilize Tate, the dynamic quarterback that, Arizona, you look at that offense last year. Once he took over at quarterback, this offense was virtually unstoppable. And last week, he never ran the football. I mean, minimal, how many?
I believe it was three rushing attempts.
This kid's, he's not a pocket passer. You want this kid moving.
And I thought that he had he's already had a quarterback like that. It's not like this is new for him. I thought it would be, a playbook he ran for Johnny Manziel.
And it was baffling because his quotes were, well, with he and his OC, we're still working out what this offense can give us. Well, Khalil Tate ran fewer than any times he did last year, and he passed more than all but one game. He had one fewer pass attempt than his career high was last year. That's not the offense. I was on the complete wrong side of this. I had Arizona as one of my top plays last week. So, granted, BYU was a little better than I expected, but I did not expect Arizona at home at night to put up 326 yards and have 129 yards and 3.7 yards per carry rushing. Now they're going to make some changes this week. Houston also thinks, though, the Houston coach thinks that their offense is going to be light years of where they were last week. Houston went to a different up-tempo offense this year. So I expect a lot of points in this game. I expect Arizona, the total's high, the total's 71. But I think this is one of those games when we look at the end of the year, when Arizona's offense gets going again and we see what Houston's offense does, this is one of these games that later in the year I think the total would easily be closer to 78, 79, or 80.
Yeah, to make your point about Houston's offense, the first half of last week they were losing in halftime to Rice. The offense couldn't do anything in the first half, and then they lit them up in the second half. So we've seen this out of a lot of the teams so far this year. Take a look at Florida State. That offense did nothing. Michigan State's offense didn't do much. It takes a while for these teams to get back into playing form. They don't have the preseason games like they do in the NFL. So the first time they play, it's a little bit of a guessing game. And unfortunately, myself and a lot of people I know guessed wrong last week.
Yeah, we all were on Arizona last week, all on the wrong side. You look at Arizona last week, they only ran 69 plays last week. You look at Rice, they ran 80-some against Euston. They got to pick it up. And part of that, too, was BYU didn't go. BYU was trying to shorten the game. So that played.
As they always will.
Yeah. Well, when you have less talent, that's what you want to do. The good coaches shorten the game when they have lesser talent.
I think I didn't like the 27 points that Euston gave up to Rice. Rice moved the ball well on them last week. And if Sumlin's not stubborn and lets this kid do what he does best, I agree with both of you guys on the total, and I like Arizona in the game. I'm not sold on Euston yet, and I think this is a little bit of an overreaction to last week because the entire world, every sharp that I know was on Arizona last week. And they got beat. So a lot of guys are not going to be there.
But yet that line came down. The line did not climb up where Arizona was laying 14. It actually came back to where they were laying 11 and a half. Yeah. And then it went back to 12. So.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one. We're going to have the old Arizona Daily Double because you got a good game here. You got Michigan State coming in, had a scare last week, and they're going to be playing the Arizona State, let's call them the Herminators. Last week they rolled, and what's funny is all of the so-called experts, ourselves included, the two Arizona teams, we were high on Arizona in Sumlin, down on Arizona State and Herm Edwards. Everybody questioned the hire.
Down on Edwards, not on Arizona State, but just can Herm Edwards, after being out of the coaching for that long, having never coached a college football game, get into that mix and coach a college game?
And he proved everybody wrong. I mean, they got out to a quick start and never looked back. Now, granted, it was Texas San Antonio. That's a team that definitely was outmanned, and they never took their foot off the gas in that game. So does that win, if you just look at scores, and this is where you get in trouble as John Q. Public. If you just look at what you saw in 1 week, you saw Michigan State struggle, have a scare, and then you had Arizona State roll, and now you're looking at Arizona State as a home underdog. Ralph, I'll start with you on this one. How do you see this game?
Well, I don't worry about that because you have to look at the opponents. Utah State would probably be a 14-point favorite to UTSA off the top of my head. So, right there it shows you they're not playing the same opponents. and Utah State also has a top 50 defense. They're one of the top group of 5 teams. But, in this instance, I am starting to believe the Herm Edwards method. And what he did is he came into this and he said, I'm going to treat this like a corporation. He's like an NFL team where he is not that guy who's coaching these kids up. He's got his OC, he's got his DC, he's got his coaches to do that. So he is more hands-off than a lot of coaches are. So will that work? We'll see down the stretch as we get further into the season. But the Michigan State situation, they were missing a couple starters, and they were big starters for the Spartans. But, they still had a 180-yard edge against Utah State. Yes, they were a 23-point favorite. Yes, they were down after the first quarter. They were, winning by a few at halftime. But I'm afraid to take this Big Ten team out of their normal environment, into the desert, into a situation that they throw a lot of fast dump-off passes. Michigan State has gotten beat last year, and with Utah State this past week, they failed to cover because the dump-off passes and the short passes, and Arizona State, that's basically their offense, are those short dump-off passes. So I don't like the matchup in this one. I'm not going to lean Arizona State, but I certainly have an opinion if I was forced to pick a side on the Sun Devils.
Brian, I'm going to go to you and ask you a question where you have a team, Michigan State, that is, Ralph said, is traveling to play on the West Coast. They're going to be playing at a time that they are not accustomed to. Not, a lot of teams will play a West Coast game, but maybe they're playing a 3:30 game, here, and so it's 12:30 on the West Coast, but it's 3:30 back home. That's not that big of a deal. But you're playing a night game out on the desert that's not normal for them. Is that any effect on a team like that?
Yeah, we're very familiar with Arizona State because we go there for spring training every year, and playing a night game there is going to be really big for these kids for Arizona State. And I made the comment before that I don't like to play Big Ten teams where they travel west. You see it every year. Wisconsin did have success, I believe, last year or the year before, and they won a game on the West Coast. But normally they don't play very well at all. And you take a look, I was really concerned about the Michigan State offense, and Rolf hit the game plan on the nail on the head with the short passing game. But take a look at Michigan State last week. Now, I take a look at early down success rate, which is how many first downs you get on first and second down. And the percentage, Michigan State was only 52%. They allowed Utah State 68%. I watched that game. Utah State was a better team in that game. They deserved to win that game. You take a look at Arizona State, and they won that game, as we talked about, 49-7. But it's one of the most dominating games I've ever seen. They had the turnover advantage, they had the +3 on the turnovers. But in sacks, they sacked UTSA 9 times. They were never sacked the entire game. 9-0 in the sacks. So they dominated that game against UTSA. And granted, it's UTSA, but they have shown better in the past. And my numbers say, from a power rating standpoint, Michigan State's aside, but I really want to play Arizona State.
With those 9 sacks, UTSA ended up having 2 yards rushing, 0.1 yards per carry.
Yeah, I hear you guys on Arizona State, and I just think that there's a little bit too much of an overreaction from Arizona State looking so much better than people thought they would be, and Michigan State having a scare. I've always been one, when you have a powerhouse, and Michigan State is supposed to be good this year, you get a scare like that, I like to take a team that next week because the coach is going to have their attention all week in practice. The fact that they played so poorly, that was a Thursday night game last week, wasn't it, with Michigan State? Thursday or Friday, they had an extra day, I believe.
Friday, yeah.
Yeah, so give them the extra day, the bad performance, get the wake-up call, and I just think that until Arizona State shows it to me against a good team, I'm not going to buy into it. Let's see what they do this week. This is a game I'm probably not going to get involved in, but if I had to, as Ralph said, I would lean to the Michigan State side because I think the number's low. I think this number should be more like 9 in this game, and I like Michigan State.
Marco, you and I disagree?
Wow.
That's not very unusual, is it?
No, it's not, is it? All right, guys, we're going to step out, take a break here. That wraps up our college previews. We're going to come back and take a look at some NFL games. We got 3 on Sunday. one on Monday night that we're going to take a look at, and that's going to be next here on the Wager Talk Podcast. Welcome back to the Wager Talk Podcast. We're heading to the NFL. It's finally regular season action. The preseason is done, guys. Throw all that stuff out. Let's start Pittsburgh, Cleveland. What other game would we start with? We got two Cleveland guys in the room and a Pittsburgh guy. We got to talk about this one. Le'Veon Bell, no show in Pittsburgh. I got to tell you, guys, you hear players talk about other players in the locker room amongst themselves, or maybe rumors, or you'll get a reporter that'll say, one of my sources said this. You never generally see guys call out another player the way the Steelers did yesterday. I mean, the offensive line, when Le'Veon Bell comes back, I don't know how he goes into that locker room after the comments that were made by the Steelers. They're pissed. There's no other way. They think this is totally selfish on him, hurting the team. This is a team that's a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Yes, I'm biased, but look at the numbers and where they're at. He's let them down. The guy that's going to start, James Conner, I love. This is a guy, I watched him at Pitt. Everybody loved him in training camp this year. They comment on his work ethic in the way he studies film, game preparation. He's not Le'Veon Bell. He's a straight-ahead runner, but he can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So they're not going to lose that part of the offensive game, but it's definitely a drop-off. Guys, how do you see this heading into your Browns, who's got a lot of buzz? The TV show, Hard Knocks, all of the moves that they made with all the draft picks. This is supposed to be the year they're supposed to see some improvement. When you're winless, it's kind of hard not to improve, but how much do they improve? Brian, start with you.
Yeah, this is a key game for Cleveland. Not only have they had all the hype in the offseason, they're playing, you wouldn't know it by the last decade, but to Cleveland, the Steelers are their rival. Right. Now, obviously, to the Steelers,
it's Baltimore.
It's got to be Baltimore. But it's a big game for Cleveland. Now, just go back a full year ago. The line on this game was 9. I believe it was 10 for a while. And Pittsburgh comes into Cleveland, and they win the game pretty easily, 21-18. But they've continued to play well against Cleveland. They've always played well against Cleveland. So this is a real game that Cleveland needs to come out and show it. The problem is Pittsburgh. I like to have teams that have in this inner turmoil that just can't wait to get on the field because they've got something to prove. That would be Pittsburgh in this situation. And the line's gone down to, I've even seen 3.5s out there. To me, from a strict power rating standpoint, and as much as I love the players in Cleveland, I don't like the coaching staff. So I think the value from a betting standpoint is on Pittsburgh. And by calling out the player that's not there, they might not be in union with him, but the team is in union in that regard. So I like the Pittsburgh side here. I'm hoping to get something a little bit lower, but as much as I'd like to back my Cleveland Browns, I just can't do it.
Ralph, I know you and I did a video on this one, so I already know where you're at on this one, but tell our listeners what you see with the Cleveland Browns and Pittsburgh.
Well, I agree with Brian that the line has come down too much. It was an over-adjustment. And listen, Le'Veon Bell is one of the best running backs in football, but he still only averaged 4.0 yards per carry last year. I mean, he had 1,200 yards, yes, but part of the reason he's sitting out is because he's a workhorse. He had 321 carries, and you add on top of that another 85 receptions. You're touching the ball 400 times. You're going to get beat up, and he was beat up. But, I'm going to give you a couple points on the Browns, and I just want our listeners to be able to hear these first. First off, Week 1 division home dogs are 13-4-1 against the spread the last 5 years. That's a positive towards Cleveland. Then there's two angles Week 1, which are almost identical. One's a little more specific. If your division foes and a non-playoff team is playing a playoff team like Cleveland is playing Pittsburgh, that non-playoff team is 32-10, 76%. Another angle similar to that is when you have a a team that won 13 or more wins one year playing a team that lost 13 or more games the next year, week 1, that angle is 22-41 against the spread. So all those things are saying take Cleveland. But listen, I'm a Browns fan. We find way to lose games. And until that regular season mentality has changed and you know how to win a game, it's just a mindset that's tough to build on. Listen, Cleveland's 1-31 the last 2 years. Cleveland hasn't won a home division game since October of 2013. That's 2014, 15, 16, and 17. They did not win a division home game. All those things are you have to learn to win a game first, and I think that's too tough to do in an opener against a division foe who's not going to take you lightly.
All right, I'm going to tell you that I lean to Cleveland in this game. I think Pittsburgh, I would like to see Pittsburgh win it. I'm hoping for a 1-point win, but I'm going to have more to say about this game when we get to the best bets.
Oh,
Cleveland,
you are stepping out.
Cleveland's not going to be my best bet, where it's going to be a total. But I'm going to give you a lot of reasons on why I like the total the way I do. So I'll save that for the best bets. Let's move to an exciting game. You've got Euston at New England. Last year, this was Deshaun Watson's coming out party. That was the 36-33 shootout where they almost beat New England in New England. Now he's coming in off of the injury. We've seen him in preseason some. At times he looked a little tentative coming off devastating injury like that. The question's going to be is, do they let him run all the offense the way he did last year, or do they try, and we see this happen so many times, RG3 is the one that comes to mind about, this was a guy who was a dynamic runner, passer, got hurt, then they try to change him a little bit, never was the same. Do we see that with Deshaun Watson? Brian, I'll start with you. This is, that's the big question mark. Does Euston stay healthy? Does Deshaun Watson continue that sensational run he had until the injury? And we keep saying it every year. Is this the year the New England Patriots fall? They're getting old. Tom Brady's 41. How long can they keep this thing going?
Yeah, you hit it right on the point there with this Houston team. It all comes down to health. I mean, that defense, they missed two of their best players last year. Coming off of a 4-12 season, I believe they had last year, teams who win 6 games or less and are on the road in week 1, road underdog, they're great against the spread. Well, last year, the line on this game was 13. Now we're looking at roughly 6. So we got a 7-point differential because everybody's so excited about Watson coming back. New England, when you take out New England's grading of your wide receivers, they have the weakest wide receiver group in the NFL. You had mentioned how everybody continues to think New England's going to drop off every single year. How many guys does New England go through that are just journeyman players, guys at the end of their career, they come to New England, all of a sudden they get some coaching behind them, and they're totally different players. The head coach and the way New England is run, you've got to put them on a different parallel to anybody else in the NFL. How many times do we see a team that is so good as New England over the last decade and they cover the spread? This is obviously a public team. You know all about public teams being from Pittsburgh. The Steelers were that way for a long time. And to be able to outsmart the competition, now you've got another season where not only are people down on New England because people are getting older, but in the offseason, the players arguing with the coach, Brady and the whole bit, didn't know when he's going to come back. These are the type of teams I like to back when they get a chance to get on the field, and that's New England here against what is going to be a very good Houston team if they stay healthy. But I like New England, and because of everything, the price is lower. There's already people talking that, New England's not even, they're locked in for the playoffs because of the weak division they're in. Right. But they're not going to be the team to beat in the AFC. A lot of people are talking the Steelers. If you grade out power rating-wise, the top 10 teams, 8 of them are in the NFC. You only got New England and Pittsburgh in the AFC. I think this is a season where New England really comes out, especially early on, and puts a foot down and really shows that they're the best team.
You talked about being the public team and still being able to cover the number. Last 3 years, if you just blindly bet the New England Patriots every week, you would have gone 28-10. how many of us would just love to go 28-10 just blindly? And that's because what they do works. And last year, they didn't cover against Euston. Did they look past Euston because it was a rookie quarterback early in the season? I think it was game 3 that he played. Then you got the element of O'Brien being a former assistant of Belichick. Did he know how to prepare his team for the Patriots? I just think it was in Deshaun Watson. You really didn't have any game film on him as far as the NFL. He did play in the Cincinnati game, but he come in that game. I don't see them looking past him this year. Now, Ralph, we all know about the Super Bowl jinx, the team that loses the Super Bowl. They're not good the following.
It's not a jinx. It's 2-15 against the spread. I mean, that's a pretty significant.
It's a big number to overcome.
That's a pretty big ATS number, yeah.
But it's how many times have we had New England in a system in a situation that was a negative, and we point out a trend like that, but it's Belichick, and he finds a way to defy the odds. That's where I'm heading with you. I agree with Brian. I like New England in this one. Where do you go?
Well, you talked about it. It was Deshaun Watson's third game. He came in the first half of game 1. Then he did play game 2, and this was his third game. And what did he do? 22 of 33, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That gives him confidence going in this game. He knows he can face the Patriots. Listen, the Patriots were not good on defense last year. They were number 29, allowing 366 yards per game. What happens? Well, they're number 29 in defense, and their DC gets a head coaching job. That's because you are under the Bill Belichick umbrella. But now you have a new DC, so you have a whole new theory. And, Matt Patricia, they say, is probably one of the smartest coaches in the NFL. He could be a rocket scientist. He really is that brilliant. So you're going to have some new schemes. Oh, Houston has the confidence. The young kid, Deshaun Watson, is playing like it doesn't matter to him. I don't think you can pull the reins off him, because if you pull the reins off him, you're changing the way he plays quarterback. He's played that way his entire career from high school to now. It's a game where I like the over. Now, I think New England's going to be safe with weather, and we should mention there's a tropical storm coming up through Mississippi that's going to have the entire Midwest with a lot of wind and rain, so make sure you're checking that this weekend. I think New England's far up north. It's not going to be a concern, but win this game. I do agree with Brian that New England just finds a way to bounce back with no matter who they have. I do like Houston this year. I do like them to win that division as long as Watt stays healthy, because he changes the entire defense. But with the Patriots and Brady and Deshaun, I like the over in this game.
Now, full disclosure, you guys know Gil Alexander does a weekly NFL podcast. I do with him every week. And one of the questions that he asks at the end of the show is, of all the big NFL favorites in 6 points or more, which one is the most likely to get upset? Even though I like New England in this one, I said on that podcast, Houston's either going to win this game outright or they're going to get blown out. I think they're going to, personally, I think New England wins by 10 or more. But this is the game of all the games that I think of the dogs that do have a shot to win outright. I would say Houston would be the one that has the shot.
Well, the Patriots, you want to talk about winning or getting upset. At home the last 2 years, they're 12-4 straight up. On the road, they're 15-1. Yeah. So they've lost 4 home games, 2 each of the last 2 years. So they are beatable if the right combination is in place.
Well, the Patriots has long been, if they're a touchdown or more favorite, you bet against them. And if they're less than that, you bet on them, because they tend to not run up the scores on other teams. And that would put us on.
And the Patriots have Jacksonville on deck. They got a road game at Jacksonville on deck.
Yeah. And that's a big That's a big game, because they know Jacksonville's got that one circled, looking ahead to the Patriots coming in. All right, last one. This is an interesting game. We're heading to, let's see if I can do it. Don't say,
yeah.
The L.A. Chargers at home against Kansas City Chiefs. The 2 meetings last year, Ralph, I'll start with you. Kansas City dominated both of those games, and they did it winning 24-10 and 30-13. The key in both of those games was the Kansas City running attack. They outrushed the Chargers 363 to 202 in those 2 games, And then the other stat, and we know in the NFL, when you win this stat, you usually win the game. In the two games combined, Kansas City, turnover margin, 7-0. The Chargers had 7 turnovers in 2 games against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs did not turn the ball over. Does that change with the change of quarterback at Kansas City? It's the new era. It's the Pat Mahomes saga. What does Andy Reid deal out for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Well, there's something to be said about the series here, and Kansas City has won 8 straight in this series. The last time the Chargers have beaten the Chiefs by over 3.5 points was back in 2012. So that's a long time to go back in the series to be laying 3.5 in a division game like this. You know what? We don't know what to make of Mahomes. He was 22 of 35 last year. He had an 0-1 ratio. But I trust in Andy Reid. In Reid, I trust. And, if he's making that determination, and he made that determination right away. He knew this player was ready for his situation. There were no bones about it. There was no not being able to sign a contract with the quarterback. Right when the season ended, he is our quarterback for next year. So if you're a Chiefs fan, you have to believe in that situation. So with the series history, with Mahomes, again, you got a new OC. You have an OC that Eric Bieniemy, who's new to the NFL. I think he's only in his second year in the NFL. He used to be a college OC for the Buffaloes. I think he was a Buffalo running back.
He was.
Yeah, so, you have that new situation as well. But, again, there's newness in this game. And if you're a Chiefs fan, you're betting on Mahomes. And since Reid made that determination, and it's not like they couldn't sign this quarterback, they just let him go, I have to believe he's going to be good enough to run the offense, and therefore I'm going to take a dog in a situation where they've dominated the foe.
The Chargers are getting a lot of love, but keep in mind that's the worst, maybe Miami, but that's the worst home field advantage.
It's the worst, no question.
In the NFL. So let's say we give them a point. Well, that would make them 2.5 points better than Kansas City, a team that's beaten them 12 straight times. The concern I have with Kansas City, and you mentioned it earlier with the turnovers, the last 3 years, Kansas City's net turnovers, plus 15, plus 16, plus 14. Who was their quarterback? Oh, yeah, the guy that they no longer have that takes care of the football and doesn't turn the ball over, similar to the Cleveland Browns' new quarterback. That is going to be a big deal with a rookie quarterback going. Kansas City. Well, I'll say right now, they're not going to have a positive turnover margin this year because he's too much of a gunslinger, and that's going to be the default play against Kansas City. Is you can't expect them to win the turnover battle like they have in the past.
I will say, right before the podcast, when we were on Las Vegas Sports Line with Dave Cokin, it did pop up that Bose is now questionable or doubtful week 1. So he's obviously a big deal for the Chargers. With him out, it could be a point. We talked about this as well. He may be worth a point or even more than that with their defense. So, again, make sure you're checking the Bose injury because there's very few defensive players we're going to say, make sure you check to see if he's playing or not. If you're going to make a decision, he's one of those that come to mind that you do want to make sure if he's on the field or not.
Yeah, and you talk about the turnovers. The other thing is Kansas City's always been a good running team. That's because you did have a quarterback that you had to respect. He didn't stretch the field. That was the knock on Alex Smith, where they like the cannon that Patrick Holmes has Mahomes for Kansas City. But until he proves that he can do it at the NFL level, a lot of teams are going to come up and cheat a little bit on stopping the run and force him to see if he can do it. So I don't see Kansas City running the football early on as effectively as they have in the past. And I think that we talk about a good running game makes an average quarterback good and a good quarterback great. If they're cheating to try to stop him because he hasn't proved it yet, this could put them in down and distance situations that are not favorable for them. That leads to turnovers. And it's also going to hurt the defense because you're not going to have those long sustained drives that they had with Alex Smith. How many times did you see a 7-minute Kansas City drive last year?
Actually, last year, Alex Smith was the most productive quarterback throwing the ball downfield. They finally let him throw the ball, stretch the ball downfield. He's more accurate than anybody. And that's why I was really surprised that they let him go and went with the younger quarterback, because that was the one weakness to his game, was he wasn't throwing the ball downfield. Last year he did it. They were opening up the playbook a little bit more for him, and then they let him go. I'm not a big Mahomes fan. I don't think that's a positive move for Kansas City, although the line's too high for me to play San Diego.
To make Brian's point, Carson Wentz last year had a yards per attempt of 7.5, and Alex Smith was 8.0. So they really did throw that ball downfield, like he said. Now, again, we're talking Mahomes is going to get blitzed. Mahomes is going to have 7 people in that box all day long. It's Mahomes is going to win the game or lose the game for the Chiefs.
And if you never want to get overexcited about anything you see in preseason, but the one problem that we have seen in the past few years with San Diego is the offensive line has not been good. Rivers has not had time. The games that I saw, the offensive line looked pretty good for San Diego. They had a lot of continuity, and if the line stays healthy, gives that, Phillip Rivers times and gets the running game going, we know this San Diego offense can score. And if they can sustain drives, it keeps the defense off the field. So that helps the defense. I like San Diego in this one. I'm going to lay the points with them, but I agree with you. We could see a high-scoring game.
I do want to make one point. He's the winner. He didn't say San Diego the entire time. I said it one time, and you said it 5 times.
Guys.
We know who's buying dinner.
Oh, there you go. All right. Yeah, I did
That's
say.
why I just said the Chargers.
I
He even has his notes, says right there, San Diego.
No, I don't. I have L.A. Chargers because I knew I would say it.
So what is that?
Oh, I did on my when I put my projected score, I put San Diego.
So that's a beer for each of us every time he said San Diego?
God.
Man. That's good.
That's good Monday Night Football.
I can tell you, all right, listeners, we will not be previewing another Charger game the rest of the season because I just can't do it. They're always going to be the Chargers.
That's like they keep going LAC. I keep thinking it's the Clippers.
Yeah,
and it's just LA for the Rams because they were there first by a wide margin.
Yeah. All right, guys, we already talked about one of the Monday night games with Joe Fortenbaugh. There's 2 this week, as they always do on the opening Monday night. We've got the Jets at Detroit. You've got Sam Darnold making his NFL debut. The Jets, surprising some people. Most people thought we would see Darnold at some point this year, but everybody figured McCown would be in there to start the season, get them off to a start, let him get his feet wet, learn the system better. But here he is, week 1, and it's on the road. It's on Monday Night Football. Could you put a tougher setting for the guy to make his NFL debut? Start with you, Ralph.
Let me jump back. I wasn't in that first with Joe. I missed that part of the conversation. I do want to point out one ATS angle for those Angle fans. Week 1 Monday Night Home Dogs are 15-5 since 1980. So it is a decent-sized number. I don't know which you guys talked about, but I just want to throw that out there. Couple angles here. Number 1, Matthew Stafford is by far the worst ATS quarterback there is in the NFL, and it's not even close. He is, when he starts a game, he's 53, 71, and 4 against the spread. So granted, he got his huge payday. Granted, the Detroit Lions love him. When Matthew Stafford starts a game, he is not good. Now, rookie quarterback starting week 1. The last 10 rookie quarterbacks to start week 1 are 7-3 against the spread. Couple names, just so we'll go back a few years. Deshaun Kaiser for the Browns covered against Pittsburgh. Carson Wentz and Dak Prescott in 2016. Wentz covered, Prescott didn't. Mariota and Winston in 15. Mariota cover, Winston didn't. Bridgewater, Carr, Bortles in 14. Bridgewater and Carr covered, Bortles didn't. And Geno Smith and E.J. Manuel started for the Jets and the Bills in 2013. Boy, was that an ugly quarterback class. But, yeah, both of those guys covered week 1. Now, I just say that, because the Jets are a team that last year shocked a lot of people starting 3-2 and said, oh, my God, what are they doing? Prior to last year, if you go back to remember, Brian, I'm sure you remember, we were talking about the Jets being a much worse team than the Browns. and the Browns would be, I think, like we said, like a field goal favorite against the Jets. So, that certainly didn't come to fruition. But, the Jets are a team that have to learn to improve. It's a Monday night game. I think this game, with what the Jets have on defense, with what offense they're going to bring, to me, it's an under game. It's a dead under game because I don't think the Jets are going to open up a wide offense with him on the road. And Detroit with Stafford has started slow these early week games. So to me, I like the under.
Ryan, you have a play in this one?
I want to defend Matt Stafford. They have a defense on these teams, and that's probably why they're not covering the spreads. Stafford, I thought, has been a very good quarterback. And since we're going to talk some numbers, let's take a look at how Detroit the last 4 years have done as a home favorite. 3-1 against the spread, 3-2-1 against the spread, 3-0-1 against the spread, 5-2-1 against the spread. You've got a Jets team, and the Jets fit into that system I told you earlier about teams winning 6 or less, road underdog. Well, that's great. That's good and all, but they've got a rookie quarterback going into to play in the Dome. I don't want to play on the Jets here. I think the Lions are the right side here. I don't know if I'll get here on this game, but I'm not as big a believer in the Jets. The Jets overperformed last year, and it was all on the coaching staff. The players just took it under their wings that they were going to play better than what they did. They started off the season very well, didn't end up that way. But that was a team that went out and played for the coach. They played a good ball game all season long. They were never out of any game.
I want to go back on one of my statements. And when I said Stafford starts slow and Detroit starts slow, I had numbers for the first 3 weeks in there. As I'm backtracking now, week 1, I will say that Detroit has put up 28 or more points each of the first 5 weeks, and 5 straight games have gone over the total for Detroit week 1. So my numbers were the first few weeks when I look at the Stafford numbers and Detroit as a whole. As I'm now looking as the week 1 numbers independently, again, I misspoke saying they start slow when they have 5 straight overs.
I'll say this much on Stafford, and I've said it numerous times. Without Megatron last year, everybody expected him to regress. I think he had one of his best seasons last year, and why I believe that is because he didn't focus on Megatron. That was always his first look, and sometimes he forced balls into him because Megatron would make, Calvin Johnson was one of the best wide receivers in the league, and he would make spectacular catches, but he didn't use his whole field. Now without him, he's looking at his first and second options and in spreading the field. I think it made him a better player. However, I don't trust Detroit laying the points in this one. It's a game I'm probably not going to be involved in, I'll be honest with you. But if I did, I'm hoping to see this take that last tick and get to 7 and get the full touchdown. You might come Monday. We'll see. But for me, if I played the game, I lean to the Jets. But I don't look to be playing this one on Monday. All right, guys. That is going to wrap up our previews of Saturday and Sunday college and pro football. When we come back, it's the last break of the night. We come back, it's Best Bets. You're going to get 3 of them, one from each of us. That's next here on the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It's the home stretch. It's Best Bet time. 3 of them. We're going to start with Ralph. Head to you. Saturday, college football action. Who do you got?
I'm going to take a big dog, and it's game 391, Connecticut. They're plus 31.5 or 32 at this time. UConn did not nearly look as bad against UCF as their score dictated. They put up 450 yards. They turned the ball over. They didn't score in the red zone. Now they got a tough trip to Boise, and Boise looked great, crushing Troy. But Boise as a home favorite, 4-15 against the spread the last couple years. I love playing on a mobile quarterback. He can get you a few scores on the road to keep it close. And most importantly, Boise has to be looking ahead. They have a road game at Oklahoma State on deck. I don't think they worry about this UConn team at all. Again, we know they're a poor home favorite. They just get enough to get it done. I like UConn plus the points, plus 31.5 or 32.
All right, good stuff from Ralph. Brian, going to go to a Saturday game. You've got another big dog as well. Who are you looking at?
32 points, that's all you got? How about 34.5 points with the Ball State Cardinals? You got a Notre Dame team last year. They were only favored by over 20 points one time, 20.5 against another MAC team. I think the Irish are a little bit better, but this is crazy with the 34.5. The Irish, their schedule is stacked all season long. They've played good teams all season long. This is the one breather they have. Coming off the game against Michigan, that was huge for them. That when you take a look at when people talk about the odds of going to the championship, they talked about Auburn and Washington. They talked about Michigan and Notre Dame the same way. And you got a Ball State team who, going into last year, I really liked the team, but they had injuries out the wazoo. And not the Kalamazoo, the wazoo. And this year, those guys are back, and they got all the guys that played last year, so they got all that experience. I think Ball State could stick on this number here and really keep this close in the first and second quarter, and they'll be easily catching this 34.5. I'll take it.
Yeah, and for Ball State going to Notre Dame, this is a monumental game for them. Those kids are going to be so sky high for playing this one. Beat the big guy, Notre Dame. They'll be revved up. Good situational play, Brian, with Ball State. So we got a 32, a 34.5. I'm going to go with a 44.5. Only we're looking at a total. We're going to go to Sunday. We're going to go to the Pittsburgh-Cleveland game, and the total is coming down. I advise you guys listening to this on Thursday night, get down on it now. It's going to continue to go down. I like the under. Here's why. We know about Le'Veon Bell. Yes, the Steelers are going to be pumped up with him not being there. But what are they going to be pumped up with? Who were the most vocal people in that game, or the people that were talking about Le'Veon Bell on Wednesday? It was all the offensive linemen. They are freaking pissed right now, and they are going to block their asses off for James Conner this week. You're going to see the Steelers move the ball. They're, obviously Ben's going to throw the football, but you're going to see a lot of running plays from the Steelers, and I think they're going to try to control this game and also protect their defense. You heard me talk about Pittsburgh and the problems that they have defensively. This is not a team that I think is going to expose that early on because of the type of game it's going to be. Here's some stats for you. The last 11 Pittsburgh-Cleveland matchups, the game has gone under 8 of the 11. The last 12 Cleveland home games, 11-1 to the under. Now the final piece of the puzzle. Todd Haley is the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. He was the offensive coordinator the last 6 years at Pittsburgh. He was shown the door, and basically, don't let it hit you in the backside heading out. He didn't leave on good terms. He took the Pittsburgh playbook with him when he left, and he's going to turn that over to Greg Williams. They had all summer to prepare for this one. Cleveland wants this game bad. It's going to be a war. I like the under. I'm going to go ahead, take Pittsburgh, Cleveland under 44 and 44.5, and Ralph is coming in with something.
Again, this is the weather factor. The weather will be in Cleveland, so if you play it early. And Marco, one more stat that I have for you. When Pittsburgh is an away favorite, they're 2-14-1 over-under the last 3 years.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh averages 7 points fewer per game on the road. They average 28 on the road, 28 at home, 21 on the road last year. 7-point difference for that offense.
A different quarterback.
He's also a different quarterback, as you pointed out. He did do a little bit better on the road last year, but Cleveland really went out and they used a first-round draft pick on a defensive back. Last year's Cleveland numbers were really good against the run, bad against the pass. This year, they're going to be much better against the pass.
All right, there you have it, guys. 3 best bets. Let's get them all. That's going to wrap up the show. I want to thank our guest tonight, Bryan Young from uwager.eu, Joe Fortenbaugh from 95.7, The Game, and the Sharp 600 podcast. Ralph Michaels, Bryan Leonard, thanks for joining me in studio. It was a big show tonight. I want to give a big shout-out to our guy, Johnny Detroit, and our staff that gets all of these podcasts out to all of the different social media outlets. You can follow us on iTunes. You subscribe to iTunes, listen to us on Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Last but not least, thanks to Mark Seidel for making sure we sound good, and to you guys, the listeners. We wouldn't have a show if you guys weren't tuning in each week, so thank you for that. I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo. Till next week, let's cash some tickets. Talk to you next week, guys.